It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Los Angeles. As devastating wildfires continue to burn here for a fourth day, police issue a stark warning to looters picking through the ruins.
If somebody's caught doing this, they are not going to get cited and released. They're going to get booked. We are not screwing around with this.
More than 150,000 people have now been ordered from their homes. We talk to the LA residents who've lost everything.
Rapper dogs, I didn't have enough water, wasn't water, and my house burned out to the ground.
Tonight, we report from across Los Angeles, a city reeling from the worst fires in its history.
Also ahead on Sky News at 10 tonight, Nigel Farage under pressure as 10 Reform UK councillors quit in protest against his leadership. Donald Trump escapes jail but will re-enter the White House as a convicted criminal. Plus, New Orleans police released body cam footage of their shootout with a terrorist who killed 14 people on New Year's Day. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Los Angeles, where wildfires continue to burn and the authorities try to maintain order. Today, a warning from police to looters that officers are not screwing around and will make offenders face the full force of the law. It's now been confirmed that 10 people have lost their lives in the fires and tens of thousands of others have been forced to flee. Tonight, we'll hear from those who've lost everything. But first, our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports on the people trying to get back to their homes.
This is a city still under siege from wildfire.
There we go.
Progress has been made tackling blazes from above, but with winds forecast to pick up again, the panic is still real. So too is the concern about law and order. The National Guard drafted in to protect evacuation zones from looters. People at this police roadblock are trying to return to their homes in the Pacific Palisades. Taylor believes his in-laws' home is destroyed.
Never seen anything like it. My in-laws' family lost their son last year to a heart attack at 39. So for them to lose him and their house in a year, it's been tough. Feel for my wife and their family, but everybody here, it's not easy.
The Palisades, people might have misconceptions about it, think it's a bunch of stuffy rich people. They were hardworking and very kind people. All my best friends have lost their homes, but they're alive. And we've lost people, a dear member of our church, but she's with God, and our whole town is grieving.
A perimeter has been established around this whole community, a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew introduced. Are you concerned about looting?
If I see someone, I'll take care of what I have to take care of. People taking advantage of other people's misfortune is horrible. I like to help people, not hurt them.
Some neighbourhoods here have private security guarding those houses still standing. Officials warning anyone stealing in these areas will be punished.
If somebody's caught doing this, they are not going to get cited and released. They're going to get booked. We are not screwing around with this.
In 25 years, this is probably the biggest incident I've ever been on.
On the front line, this firefighting strike team is extinguishing hot spots in the rubble. But they say there wasn't enough water to tackle the raging blazes. How big a problem is that when you're coming across hydrants that are dry?
Oh, especially in the first 2 days, it was incredible. I mean, you come out into a neighborhood that's literally ablaze, and we're stuck with a fire engine that has 500 gallons on it because this local system doesn't have any in it. So it's hard. It makes it hard for us to do our job effectively.
How often does that happen, that the water?
Almost never.
A large reservoir in the Palisades was also reportedly closed for repairs when the fire hit, even when the wildfire warning was extreme. The quiet here is arresting as people contemplate what will become of this place, wondering if anything can be done to stop it happening again. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Pacific Palisades.
Well, the authorities here are investigating claims that some of the wildfires may have been started deliberately. Whatever their cause, high winds have been making the fires spread, making controlling the blaze so difficult and dangerous for firefighters. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been examining how the infernos took hold.
Even as the fires continue to burn, open source techniques using social media and satellite imagery can give us some clues about how and why they started. Now, this is what residents of Los Angeles woke up to on Friday morning. Hundreds of thousands of acres have been burned. The two biggest fires, Pacific Palisades and Eaton, still uncontained. Let's focus on the Palisades fire first. It's home to the likes of Tom Hanks and Ben Affleck, along with thousands of other residents. Now, 20,000 acres have been burned here, the largest area so far. And it was also the first fire to spark here at Skull Rock. Now, this is from Google Street View. It shows what looks like an unassuming hillside, actually part of a 4.5-mile route used by hikers. And as hikers, they gave us the evidence for the earliest blaze. A hiker called Ben from Malibu filmed this video at 10:30. And we can see it from another angle. This is different. It's video from an airport streaming site. At 10:28, as a United flight lands, there's a smoke plume that can be seen getting larger. And at 10:30 a.m., we see fire and active flames, and the commentator begins talking about it.
Uh-oh, not something we want to see here in Southern California. A fire has now broke out. That is looking like Encino. Uh-oh.
But different fires kept sparking, quickly catching because of the winds. Now, the Kenneth fire is 30 miles west. It was first reported at 2:40 p.m. on Thursday near a place called Victory Trailhead. This one, though, was extinguished relatively quickly. It didn't go that far. But multiple fires, big winds, have meant the spread has been enormous. Now, this is Sky News analysis of infrared satellite imagery. Effectively, what this is showing is heat seen from space, and you can see how these fires grew all over LA, and especially in those two big areas. For comparison, this is a map of London. What we've done is superimpose the combined fire areas on top of the capital. You can see how big it is. AccuWeather, a weather forecasting company, has estimated that the provisional economic loss because of the fires is around $135 to $150 billion, around £120 billion. Put that into context, it's nearly 4% of the annual gross domestic product of the entire state of California. And those fires are still not under control. There could be more damage to come.
Well, more than 150,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes. In many cases, they fled with just the shirts on their backs. Our US correspondent David Blevins has been to an evacuation centre in Pasadena, to the north of Los Angeles, to speak to people who have been left with virtually nothing.
She's just one of the displaced. There are hundreds of them taking shelter in this evacuation centre. Many of them elderly. They didn't even have time to retrieve their medication before fleeing the fire with their pets in this northern suburb of Los Angeles.
The fire was coming down, a ball of fire. It hadn't made it to my house, but then I woke up and I seen it coming, so I had to start evacuating. I grabbed my dogs, and I didn't have enough water. It wasn't water, and my house burned down to the ground, so.
I smelled smoke. I was sleeping, of course, and my dog alerted me that there was trouble. And when I looked outside, there's embers flowing across my yard. My whole neighborhood is gone. It was a beautiful, unique place.
You're smiling. How are you smiling through this storm?
Because there's tomorrow, you know.
There are young families desperate for help. They had nowhere else to go. Stephanie is finding homes for pregnant teenagers. She's volunteering here.
It's very heavy, yeah. I mean, you walk through and you see the despair on people's faces, not knowing what their next step is, not knowing if their house is still standing. Those that know their house isn't there anymore don't know what to do. I mean, I had to take a few moments to kind of put myself together and kind of cry. and then you go back to serve. It just breaks your heart.
3 miles up the road, the streets resemble a war zone. Those who lived here had no defence against the flames. And this is what they'll be returning to. There's nothing remaining of the material lives these people left behind. How do you even think about rebuilding when the ground beneath you is ashes? They won't be back soon. There's a very real danger concealed by the debris. These crews are fire spotting, extinguishing the threat of the blaze reigniting. For those on the front line, it feels like a never-ending battle.
Job.
David Blevins, Sky News in Los Angeles.
And David joins us now from Altadena. And David, is the enormity of what has happened to these people now, after a couple of days, starting to sink in?
Well, I think it's going to take a long time for it to sink in. Right now, they're just dealing with the immediate crisis they face. They've been left homeless and they have been left without any of their belongings. But several things are happening as we speak in Altadena. Firstly, a major security operation, of course, because with so many people having been evacuated from their homes, this is one of the suburbs most affected by looting. And as you can see, the National Guard has been deployed here to support Los Angeles Police Department in protecting people's homes. Now, what homes, you might ask, given the destruction we've witnessed, but remarkably, some property did escape completely unscathed, but that property is particularly vulnerable now because this remains an active evacuation zone. We've seen people coming to the tape all day in a desperate attempt to get back and see what remains of their property, but they're not being allowed through yet. Now, it is incredible that in the midst of this disaster that police are having to deal with the threat of looting, but where we see the worst of humanity, we also see the best of humanity, because also throughout the day people keep coming here with free food. They bring bottles of water. I saw one woman down the street with a car boot full of clothes, and while that might feel like just a drop in the ocean when you consider the scale of this tragedy, it is that sense of community that we've been witnessing here that is providing some comfort for people, and it's what they're going to need to sustain them in the days ahead as they begin to trickle their way back to their homes and begin to think about rebuilding.
Yeah, David, and we've seen similar scenes here. We've seen some people just a short while ago from a restaurant in Los Angeles coming up here to bring drink and food to the firefighters in the station behind us for exactly the same reason as that woman that you spoke to. Thanks very much, David. Well, President Biden said tonight that the wildfires here were linked to climate change. And today, climate scientists confirmed that 2024 was the hottest year on record and the first to breach a key global warming target of keeping temperatures below 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, has more.
Wildfire tearing through one of the world's wealthiest and most celebrated cities is staggering. But the latest evidence from the EU's Climate Monitoring Service suggests the fires aren't remarkable just because of where they are, but why. Last year was the hottest ever recorded. Not everywhere, as this map of air temperatures shows, but averaged out, 2024 was 1.6 degrees warmer than pre-industrial times. Look at that data another way, and you can see just how anomalously warm 2023 and 2024 were. The analysis also found that that warmer atmosphere also held the highest moisture levels ever recorded, 5% more than the 30-year average. Moisture that must fall as rain, causing 2024's extreme flooding, like here in Valencia in Spain, and places where that rain didn't fall, like East Africa, just had to deal with extreme heat and record drought. Our climate has become alien to us.
What we've seen last year is unprecedented, actually, in human history. You would have to go back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, to find a planet that has had an equally high or higher temperature. And this would be a totally different world where continents were in different places and there were no human societies.
Much of that extreme weather is governed by our oceans. Compared to the 30-year average, that's this line here, the ocean warming we've seen is stark. But this is important too. Many of these peaks and troughs are linked to a natural phenomenon called El Niño, La Niña in the Pacific Ocean. The 2023-24 warm spike was partly boosted by El Nino. But look how a typically cooler La Nina period failed to bring global temperatures down by much in this warmer world. El Nino also rules California weather, but climate change has upped the extremes. Last winter, they had plenty of rain, but with the La Nina phase now, rain is falling further north, whereas in LA, there's been drought. Last year's heat and rain boosted vegetation growth, an unusually warm, dry winter, creating perfect conditions for fire, whether started by accident, arson, or nature. At the end of this year, world leaders meet in Brazil to try once again to cooperate in slowing global warming. It's a process America's next president wants not just to withdraw from, but halt. Could what's happening in Los Angeles change his thinking?
We shall see. Well, let's talk now to our US correspondent, Martha Calney. You heard from her a little earlier, who's been at the forefront of so much of extraordinary reporting this week, Martha. You were there as the wildfires raged about. You saw people fleeing their homes, and then you witnessed that really, really extraordinary confrontation between one woman and the governor. Do you think this city can rebuild?
I think in terms of infrastructure, Jane, it definitely can rebuild. You know, there's an awful lot of money, an awful lot of business here. But I guess the question is, how long will it take for individuals to rebuild and put back together the pieces of their lives? You know, I was driving down this road 3 p.m. on Tuesday. The fires had started at 10:30 a.m. It was a scene of utter panic. Many of these buildings that you see destroyed now were just beginning to catch blaze at that point. And I was driving up a bit further into the residential areas, and I came across an 84-year-old woman. She was actually standing panicked at the end of her drive, and she waved at my team and I down, and she said, you know, I simply don't know how to evacuate. I have no car, I have no family, I don't know how to get out of here. Can you help me? We eventually sort of hooked her up with a neighbour who was also fleeing, very panicked. She asked if we could help go inside and get her belongings. So we put her heart medication, she had congestive heart medication, in a plastic bag. That's all she left with. We went back to see that house today and it was completely gone. So those cases are the most heartbreaking, I think.
They absolutely are. Martha, thanks so much. And it does feel like the panic is starting to subside here. But, you know, as Martha was saying, so many homes entirely gone. And if you look at the buildings behind us, there are still pockets of little flames in some of these buildings. All it takes is for the wind to come back to whip it back up. And you do wonder, once the clear-up has got underway, how many people in this community will actually want to come back here, will feel safe enough to live here, will feel safe enough to bring their families back here. And it could be that could be the biggest scar that this ferocious fire leaves on Los Angeles. That's it from us for now, but I'll hand you back to Barbara in the studio.
Jane in Los Angeles, thank you. Now, 10 Reform UK councillors have quit the party in protest against the leadership of Nigel Farage. Just hours earlier, Mr. Farage had insisted that he and Elon Musk are still friends after the world's richest man accused him of not having what it takes to lead his party. Let's go live to Westminster and our political correspondent, Liz Bates. So, Liz, any reaction from Reform UK to the standing down of these councillors?
Yes, understandably, and this story has been developing over the last couple of hours, so we have had reaction. Just to clarify, on this group of councillors that has resigned, they have put out a statement. What they say is that since Nigel Farage assumed the leadership on the 3rd of June, the party has lost all sense of direction. They believe the current management is either incompetent or malevolent. They've lost all confidence, they say, in his leadership. They say it's just not a democratic party. The reaction from Reform tonight has been basically to push them to one side. What they say is that at least one of these councillors was already suspended by the party, and so they don't really recognise it anyway as a resignation. Look, I think what's going on is there's a bit of a power struggle between long-standing Reform councillors and this new push from the current leadership to professionalise, to vet more of their candidates and, of course, to impose their candidates into local seats. And I think that is where this tension is arising. The the other issue, of course, very different, much more globally focused. Nigel Farage has had a bit of a spat publicly with the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. It was over the far-right leader, Tommy Robinson. Nigel Farage has always distanced himself from Tommy Robinson. Elon Musk has a different approach. He has responded to that spat today. What happened was Elon Musk, in the end, called for Nigel Farage to resign. This was after weeks of them cozying up to each other, and we thought that Elon Musk was going to donate huge amounts of money to the party. So he has responded to that today. He was speaking to our correspondent, Ali Fortescue. This is what he said.
I can't be pushed or bullied or made a change by anybody. I stick to what I believe in, even if that sometimes means there are some short-term consequences.
So two very different problems, but both of them, I think, if they rumble on, could really threaten some of that momentum that we've seen reform building up over the last few weeks. So they will certainly be wanting to dampen down these problems over the next couple of days.
Liz Bates in Westminster. Liz, thank you. Donald Trump was spared jail today as he was sentenced following his conviction in the Stormy Daniels hush money case. It means that in 10 days' time, he will be sworn in as America's first ever convicted criminal. He told the convicted president, he told the court the charges had been politically motivated. Our correspondent James Matthews joins us now from Washington, where Donald Trump will be inaugurated for a second time in just 10 days. James, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Barbara. Yes, an unconditional discharge. That's what Donald Trump was told he would get today, and that was duly delivered by the judge, Juan Marchand. It has no practical effect on Donald Trump. No jail sentence, no fine, no probation. Essentially, it's a wrap over the knuckles for that guilty verdict, and it formally completes the process that classifies him as a convicted felon. That's how he will be sworn in at the January the 20th inauguration as president. It will be a stigma, a stain on the 47th presidency, one that he fought hard to avoid, went to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, to seek a delay yesterday. They didn't give it to him. Donald Trump wasn't happy. He featured in today's proceedings via video link from Mar-a-Lago. Let's listen to some of what he had to say. He wasn't happy.
It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history.
We've heard that before from Donald Trump. We will hear it again. His lawyers will continue with their appeal against his hush money conviction. Yet another stress test for America's legal system. But what's stressing Donald Trump is that he will be forever remembered now in U.S. history as the president who was sworn in as a convicted criminal.
James Matthews in Washington, D.C., thank you. Staying in the U.S., police in New Orleans have released footage which they say confirms that the attacker who killed 14 people on New Year's Day fired at officers before he was shot and killed. Shamsuddin Jabbar drove a truck into people celebrating on the city's famous Bourbon Street in an act apparently inspired by the Islamic State terror group before being surrounded. A warning that this report from our international correspondent Diana Magnay contains the exchange of fire between Jabbar and police.
It all happened so fast. Police say the New Orleans attacker fired first, and he's then killed in this deafening final shootout as fellow officers scramble for cover. A terrifying final moment captured on police body cam footage after a horrific act of terror in the early hours of New Year's Day. The police circling the muzzle flash from Shamsuddin Jabbar's weapon in an attempt to prove that he fired first.
As officers surrounded the vehicle, the driver fired at them. In response, Sergeant Nigel Daggs, along with officers Christian Byer and Jacoby Jordan, returned fire. They killed the terrorist.
14 people were killed by Jabbar as they welcomed in the new year. Innocent victims from 18 to 63, all dying, according to the coroner, from blunt force injuries after he ploughed his pickup truck along Bourbon Street as people ran for their lives. The first lawsuits have been filed against the city of New Orleans, arguing that this was tragic but preventable. Had the city made sure the bollards meant to protect pedestrians from just this kind of attack had been in proper use.
Now in November 2024, they come in and they remove the bollards, but they don't put anything back in on an interim basis. Nothing. Now Bourbon Street is completely exposed.
A US Army veteran who claimed to be inspired by Islamic State, Shamsuddin Jabbar had planned for even worse. CCTV footage showing him placing cooler boxes filled with explosives at the scene shortly before midnight, which he never managed to detonate. William Bratton, who led police departments in New York and LA, has been called in to work on the city's security. And as New Orleans gears up for carnival season, he has a big job on his hands. Dana Magnay, Sky News.
As the UK's cold snap continues, Centrica, the owner of British Gas, has said gas storage levels are concerningly low, with less than a week's worth available. Well, Downing Street has insisted that the UK has enough natural gas supplies to make it through the winter and has all the tools necessary, if needed, to secure the country's supply. The Chancellor has arrived in China for trade talks, despite calls for her to cancel the trip over market jitters at home. The Conservatives say Rachel Reeves should have stayed at Westminster as government borrowing costs rise. But ministers insist the Chancellor's visit is absolutely necessary to make sure the UK prospers in the international economy. Police Scotland say they've captured a second pair of lynxes in the Highlands. The animals are safely in the care of the Royal Zoological Society after being spotted roaming free around Conusi. Another pair were captured on Thursday. It's believed that they were illegally released. Let's go to Glasgow now, where Sky News has been given access to the UK's first injecting room in which drug addicts can take heroin and cocaine under NHS supervision. The facility is set to open on Monday, but opinion is divided on whether it will help to reduce drug deaths, as our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis now reports.
So people will come here, there'll be a nurse at the nurses' station, and this is where they select their equipment.
Inside Europe's drugs death capital, there is a new beginning.
This area is the using space, so this is where people will come to take their injection.
At any one time, 8 addicts can consume their heroin and cocaine as NHS medical staff supervise.
They'll come through here, and this is the recovery area, so you'll see the seats are slightly higher, and this is where people sit, again, observed by a nurse.
The journey ends in a quiet zone where housing and sexual health teams are on hand, in a taxpayer-funded facility costing £2 million a year.
They can't purchase on-site, they can't share drugs on-site, and they can't sell drugs on-site. Those are 3 very strict rules. We must adhere to those.
Scotland has been gripped in a relentless cycle of death. Year after year, lives lost to drugs. Glasgow, a city where HIV among users has been rife. A city where there have been few successful solutions. Taylor says his friends are ready to give it a go.
It'll be somewhere warm where they can sit. They don't need to worry about dying, you know what I mean? There's been loads of people talking about it. The police was talking about it just the other day.
What was that conversation like?
Brief, but they were asking us if we would use it, you know what I mean, and avoid using the streets and stuff like that.
This is a perfect illustration of the problem. This dirty, damp, dangerous area is literally a stone's throw away from the new facility. And look, it's absolutely covered in used needles. The idea is to tempt addicts away from using places like this.
I think we have an unacceptable level of drugs deaths in Scotland, and that's why we have a national mission which has taken forward a range of different interventions to try to tackle these issues.
Is it working though? Because we've had another 12% increase in deaths last year, and yes, this facility is coming in to action now, but some experts say this will not make a difference in terms of drug deaths.
I accept there's different opinions, but there's a lot of expert opinion that supports this facility.
Critics call it a vanity project.
Unfortunately, the way this has been sold to the public and the local councillors is that it will offer some sort of open door pathway to other types of treatment. But we know that that's just not true. Glasgow only has 23 rehab beds.
While there won't be arrests for possession of drugs here, police insist blatant crimes will still be tackled. Could that spell trouble for a project never seen before in the UK? Conor Gillis, Sky News, Glasgow.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Welcome both. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Telegraph, the headline, 1 week's supply of gas left as cold bites. We'll be right back.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top story. Thousands of firefighters are continuing to tackle the wildfires, which have devastated parts of Los Angeles, while police have issued a warning to looters that they'll face the full force of the law. 10 Reform UK councillors have quit the party in protest against the leadership of Nigel Farage. And Donald Trump has been spared jail today following his conviction in the Stormy Daniels case, but he'll be America's first ever convicted criminal to be sworn into office. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, The Times leads with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, defending her decision to hold talks with the Chinese government, saying the UK has, as she puts it, no choice at all but to engage with Beijing. The Eye reports that interest rates on mortgage deals could reach 5% in the coming weeks as Ms. Reeves faces pressure to get the economy under control. According to the Financial Times, part of that work will involve coming up with initiatives for growth that don't result in needing to increase taxes. According to the Mail, a pledge by the government to boost defence spending may not be actioned until the 2030s. The Telegraph hears that the UK is down to just 1 week's supply of gas reserves. The Mirror speaks to former Hull City footballer Dean Windass, who's been diagnosed with dementia at the age of 55. According to The Sun, an unnamed Premier League footballer has been arrested on his training pitch over allegations that he made a sex tape without consent. The Express is outraged that the England Cricket Board hasn't cancelled its team's scheduled match against Afghanistan, despite the Taliban saying it will no longer let the country's women's team play the sport. And The Star cites a study claiming that the secret to a happy life is to never put your full effort into anything. We tell you more, but apparently they haven't made the effort to send us the full story. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Alex Dean. Welcome both. OK, let's start with the economy. It hasn't been a great week. Obviously, government borrowing to the highest levels, I think, in 16 years. Value of the pound has plummeted. And of course, the government has always said they're not going to put taxes up again. So let's look at what the FT is going with. They have a story about Labour lining up fresh drive to bolster growth. So, Alex, talk us through this.
Well, they need to do something, and one wants the government to do well. I was a Conservative candidate at the last election. I fought against them. They won. They have an absolute mandate to govern. They govern for our country. But this is really bad. I mean, the 10-year rate on gilts is at its highest for over a decade. The 30-year gilt rate, which is debt we pass on to children yet to be born, is higher than it's been since Tony Blair was in office in 1998. This is much higher rates of servicing our debt than Liz Truss saw. And Labour got into office in part by saying how much Liz Truss had so-called tanked the economy or crashed the economy. Well, this is, I'm afraid, Rachel Reeves crashing the economy. On any metric, it's worse than we've had it for several years now. We're paying more to service our debt than the Greeks do. That's the sort of thing that makes you sit up and realise where things have gone wrong. Interest rates we were expecting on all of the forecasts from last year to come down 3, maybe even 4 times this year. Most forecasters are now saying perhaps once. Business confidence down very significantly. As you point out, sterling down, but that worries me less. Currencies fluctuate. But if you check if your pension's invested in UK stock, as most people's are, and you check your pension pot on your app today, you're very likely to see the value of your pension's gone down. You've got a mortgage and you're going to have to remortgage soon. You'll find that the rates are going up. This is bad, especially in an environment where interest rates aren't coming down and inflation is going up. All round, very bad for the government. They have to try and stimulate things. And so Labour is driving up a fresh drive to bolster growth. And in the disarmingly honest line they've given to the FT, if something sounds like it's going to assist growth, we'll say yes.
Yeah, I mean, the markets have turned on the government, for absolute sure. These rates were going up by 0.1% every day this week, which was kind of terrifying. But I don't think... I mean, you're making it sound like a kind of individual consumer issue, but it's not really, is it? It's an issue... It's the... Basically, if the government's plan was to be very kind of mild. If you look at the last budget, it was pretty mild tax rises, mild increases.
£40 billion tax.
Hang on a second, stop talking when I'm talking. There was a very mild programme, economically speaking, and if the plan is to do that and borrow money, you need the money, you need the interest, you need the rates to be low. They can't do the plan with high rates. So whoever, you know, it is going to look like them either coming out and announcing a fresh raft of austerity, which you're completely right, after trashing trusts and then seeing higher rates and then promising not to do austerity, then coming out saying they were going to do more, is going to look absolutely appalling. But, on the other hand, you know, you can't just say growth 100 times and see growth. Somebody needs to say where the growth's coming from.
That we are seeing. But I think it's very difficult to claim this isn't an individual issue or a consumer issue.
Well, I mean,
when inflation is where it is and hiring has gone off a cliff, right? So we're seeing real growth in hiring rates in this country, and now we are not. And that's an individual issue, isn't it?
I'm not saying it's not going to touch individuals. I'm saying that the crisis in the government is going to be obvious before you see your pension pot go down, or before you worry about your pension pot.
I agree on the crisis in the government.
Let me just bring up another front page, which leads into it, because, Alex, you mentioned the rise or interest rates not being cut the way that we thought they were going to be cut. Front page there of the iMortgage rate set to rise as Reeves faces crunch weeks on UK economy.
And the other thing that the eye reveals, this is when people start putting out their feelers for whether there might be significant movement in government. Unless Rachel Reeves can show her plan is working, Labour MPs, unnamed, brief the eye, Keir Starmer might have to make a decision. They mean that about the future of our Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. When people start making these kinds of comments, it's in part those in and around leadership testing what people think about such a thing. But it also displays, I think, a willingness. For some time, Rachel Reeves' political instincts in opposition were part of what propelled Labour to government. She was seen as a solid performer. She was seen as an extremely successful person on the front bench. And I think this suggests she's no longer seen as quite the asset which she once was.
I mean, I'm surprised that they put that on the splash, to be honest, because when you've got unnamed MPs of unnamed provenance with an unnamed position and it's completely unclear whether it's a disgruntled backbencher or an actual cabinet minister, if I were the news editor, I wouldn't put it as a bullet point.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't have the same, no offence to you and your industry, we don't have the same editorial standards as, say, the American newspapers, which double source everything. But you're not suggesting that your peers and colleagues at the Eye are lying when they say Labour MPs plural.
I'm not saying they're lying. I'm saying it's just a little bit weak. You know, is that 2 MPs and are they from nowhere and did they only just enter Parliament, or is that 20 MPs and are they really important MPs and have they been in Parliament for a long time? It's like these are important distinctions, and a lot of papers wouldn't have put that on the cover.
Main point being mortgage rates are going to go up. I think that's a consumer issue.
And while all of this is going on, of course, Rachel Reeves is in China. Let's look at the front page of The Times on Saturday. Reeves, UK needs China. Her quote, ignoring Beijing, no choice at all, says the Chancellor. She has been criticised, Zoe, hasn't she, for going at this point. Do you think she's right, both in going and saying that ignoring China is not an option? Well,
actually, having just slated the Eye, they do completely distill the dilemma she was in, which is that it does look strange because it's an incredibly... It's a time full of jeopardy, and she does look as though she doesn't realise how serious it is. At the same time, if she cancelled, that would have looked like she was panicking. So how on earth is a kind of mature and sensible Chancellor supposed to react like this?
I'm more sympathetic to her than you might have expected me to be. I think that your economics editor, Ed Conway's report on the importance of Chinese industry to the UK was very good, broadcast shortly before we came on air tonight. Clearly, a British Chancellor has to think about the growth of the Chinese economy and where we fit into it, and she probably should go and see the Chinese. The timing is really bad. Right? The timing is really unfortunate, especially when she didn't, for whatever reason, attend Parliament to answer the urgent question on the state of the economy only this week. And the Times also points out on its front that because we're not getting the second rate cut that we'd all expected on interest rates, 1.8 million people due to come off fixed-rate mortgages and who would be hoping for lower mortgage rates won't be getting them.
OK. But so you think when she says no choice at all in engaging with Beijing...
Yeah, I'm actually sympathetic to the Chancellor going to China. I think that our British Chancellor should prioritise our relationship with China. I just think when this kind of thing's playing out, the timing's really bad.
OK. Let's go to a different story, just moving away from the economy, but a story we've all been talking about for weeks now. Guardian, grooming gang rhetoric risks inciting massacre streeting. Now, obviously, we've seen a lot of very strong words on the whole issue of the grooming gangs and how it was or not dealt with properly. A lot of it coming from Elon Musk. But, Zoe, it's not just the Elon Musk comments that West Streeting is talking about.
No, West Streeting is talking about an overall febrile atmosphere, which you can see among numerous right-wing commentators on Twitter. You can see it from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition. You can see it from GB News. And indeed, the story was germinated in GB News rather than by Musk. Musk kind of picked it up on the kind of embers that had already been going. Now, the interesting thing about West Streeting's interview is that he seems to be trying to play both sides of the crowd. So he says the one thing which we lead on, which I agree with, that a lot of this rhetoric is going to incite massacre. But then earlier on in the piece, he says there was a huge amount of cowardice, which in failing to name the racial profile of the abusers. Now, that's like, I mean, what's extraordinary to me is that we covered this at the time when Jay's report came out and 4 years previous to that. And many of the officials who said it was because we were too careful over racial sensibilities, it was just because they weren't dealing with the issue well enough. So they used racial sensitivity as a fig leaf for their own incompetence and of a number of systemic failures which were completely obvious. And I didn't see any right-wing commentator, any right-wing politician take any interest in the story at all 10 years ago when the report came out. So to have them now ask for another inquiry when there's an inquiry right in front of them detailing what happened.
But I guess West Streeting is more specifically focusing on the rhetoric around it and some of the language.
Is,
so, Alex, what do you make about it?
And so you don't think we should be talking about it?
It's not that we shouldn't be talking about it, it's that we should be detailing what actually happened. You know, what actually happened was this was a systemic failure by councils sending kids out of area to save money and stranding young people hundreds of miles from the people who knew them, where they were incredibly vulnerable. And then saying, which is the most outrageous thing, oh, we failed these girls by not talking about racial profiling enough. Now, all races are guilty of child abuse, as the Baroness J report found.
You don't think that noticing that there is a racial profile, if it's a lot of the grooming gangs, is even legitimate to...
It's not whether or not it's legitimate, it's just that isn't what would have solved the problem, and that isn't what caused the problem. You know, the reason councils didn't deal with it well enough was not because they were scared of racial sensitivity, it's because they weren't dealing with it very well, and that was often because they were trying to save money.
When one council allowed a young victim to be adopted into the family of her rapist, and the council worker turned up to the so-called wedding, underage, you don't... That's not to do with the excuse or reason that you've just offered about moving people out of area.
No, it's not. But, you know, there were systemic council failures, and I think they were to do with cost-cutting and incompetence.
So we disagree about the West Streeting part. But anyway, go on.
Sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Obviously, hugely emotive issue. And this line in The Guardian is about the rhetoric, basically, and the kind of language, not so much the sort of issues, but the way it's discussed. So we're going to have to move on. Just now coming up, Britain's gas reserves are reportedly down to just a week's supply. Should we be concerned? We'll discuss that next.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
In the last 5 years, more than 13,000 farmers have left agriculture in the UK.
Is it going to be viable for the future?
No farmers, no food! The frustration, the anger, the fact that so many of them are at risk of going bust has now become too much.
You've got to keep hope because one day it's going to be okay.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent.
It's scary what's happening in the country.
It's the illegal migrants that we don't want here.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale. Having the police speak to us so starkly right in the middle of the riot showed just how serious the situation was. The water on board the barge contaminated with Legionella bacteria, an outbreak that was first revealed by Sky News. There have been questions for months over whether the support offered to asylum seekers on the bivvy is sufficient.
A cruel place to put human beings.
From busy cities to rural communities, we spend every day reporting on how big decisions impact real people. The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4.
Today is a day in history in Talbot.
The closure means more than 2,000 job losses. It just seems madness. It is a highly contagious infection. South West Water did apologise again.
This is the Revenge Porn Helpline.
They're helping terrified victims.
You've been a victim of a very common type of online crime known as sextortion. We're making things better for people.
Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil.
Now I can say I've been to the orange Stonehenge.
Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview, and I'm here with Zoe and Alex. Let's go straight to the Daily Telegraph. Quite a concerning story, considering how cold it's been, certainly the past week. 1 week's supply of gas left as cold bites is the headline. And what they're saying is the UK's storage sites are now only about half full. That's according to Centrica, and that's 26% lower than this time last year, Zoe.
And furthermore, the really chilling comparisons, if you'll accept the word, are with the rest of Europe, where it's typical to have between 80 and 120 days storage. Now, the thing is, we always look bad when we put our gas storage in a list, because we never have, we've always got a just-in-time supply market with gas. And that's been true for at least 10 years, if not longer. So there is a Labour spokesman saying this is Centrica just trying to put pressure on them, because it's exactly the right time to put pressure on the government to just loosen the purse strings with Centrica, because it's so cold that everybody looks at that and thinks, I don't want there to be a week, I want there to be 3 months. But, you know, I won't know until the gas comes off how
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
This
How
is.
worried should we be?
Very worried. We consciously chose to close the only really significant gas storage facility we have under the North Sea called Rough. That happens to also be a Centrica facility. We should be reopening it, and it's been open to about a fifth of a percentage now, but that's more than double of our current capacity, and that's why we're so far behind. So we slightly disagree on the facts. I think we've quite recently become less strong in gas storage, and we can and should fix it.
OK. Let's move on to the Daily Express. Just want to get the story in front page. It's just not cricket to ban women. And this is England cricket chiefs basically urging people to do the right thing and boycott a match against Afghanistan in defiance to the Taliban that have banned women, not just from sport, but basically, apparently, from pretty much anything. Do you think there should be a boycott, Zoe?
I think it's actually other sporting giants pressurising cricket, because cricket has always been quite conservative in terms of not trying to keep it out of politics, which normally they get lucky on, right? They don't really have to make this call very often, but they don't want to make a call. They don't think they should get their hands dirty.
Zoe's right. The cricket board and players are intending to go ahead, and there's pressure on them from outside. I'm highly sympathetic to the suggestion that we shouldn't play countries like this that repress women in the way that the Taliban do appallingly.
So you think we should or shouldn't?
I'm highly sympathetic to those who say we should not enter into such matches. The trouble is, where do you go once you start down that road? Think about who's been hosting World Cups of late and who's going to be hosting World Cups in the football. Once you start that position, I'm afraid it won't end with cricket.
Well, I don't mind. I would be really happy to not play major tournaments in countries that are routinely homophobic and misogynistic. That is absolutely fine. But you're right, I don't watch that much cricket.
But you also say the Taliban is quite an extremist.
It's an appalling...
But I mean, compared even to other countries that have hosted
Of course, I'm highly sympathetic to anyone's... It's a terrible shame. Shame is too weak a word, that Taliban have anything to do with anyone's governance. And the way that women have been repressed and people have basically turned a blind eye to the suffering in that country is appalling.
OK, we have time for just one last story. Daily Star, we're 100% certain you should never give 100%. So basically, we just not put any effort in anything. Zoe,
I think...
in 20 seconds, please.
You know, I'm actually surprised they ran with this, because it's basically just saying don't be a perfectionist, which we've known for ages.
I could have looked this up online, but I decided not to bother.
There you go. On that note, Alex, so we're going to leave it there. I'll see you in the next hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, as devastating wildfires continue to burn, police in Los Angeles issue a stark warning to looters. We're going to have all the latest live from Los Angeles. Stay with us.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub. Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem. Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.